Everybody loves open world games, and it's because they give you freedom. You can go this way, you can go that way, you can go anywhere, and that's why the modern AAA gaming market is packed full of them. However, the genre is haunted by a conflict that it will never escape from. On the one hand, the promise of an open world is that you can travel anywhere, but on the other hand, we gotta think about what Reggie says.
The game is a battle. If it's not fun, why bother? If it's not a battle, where's the fun?
Games are all about challenge. There has to be reasons why you can't do something, or you won't feel good when you eventually achieve it. If you can just charge your horse up the side of a mountain, you're not going to feel very much when you reach the top. And so that's the conflict. How do you make a player feel like they can go anywhere, while still forcing them to overcome a series of challenges? There's a whole bunch of ways you could try to solve that problem, but I think that Subnautica Below Zero does it especially well. Let's start with the basics. It's a game about scuba diving, and so your primary limitation is
oxygen.
You start out with pretty weak gear, and you can only stay underwater for 30 seconds at a time, meaning 15 seconds going down and 15 seconds coming back up. This mechanic implies something very important. To progress, you need to go deeper. In Below Zero's first area, you can scrape together some air tanks and flippers, and soon you'll also stumble across the pieces of a small submarine.
Let's go.
Now, I don't want to spoil all of the vehicles in the game, but the basic function is to act as a pocket of oxygen that you can park well beneath the ocean surface. And this lets you explore a deeper area without having to travel all the way back up and down every time you need air. Now, your sub does have a maximum depth of 150 meters, which means that the areas you can reach are still limited. It might be counterintuitive to think that an open world game should limit exploration, but the important thing is to make sure that these limits are soft. So rather than totally blocking progress, just add elements that make it a bit harder, like how you burst into flames when you reach Death Mountain, but only if you didn't come prepared. None of the habitats in Below Zero are actually locked away. You can reach many of them pretty early on in the game if you swim fast enough, although the downside is that you'll have less time to explore before you head back up for more air. And that's the game's first design trick. By putting this kind of soft limit on exploration, you can guide players to the right parts of the world without it feeling like it was a forced choice. So we've talked about restricting the player, but a game also needs incentives. Why should you go one way over another? What are you gonna gain when you get there? How do you know where to start looking? Subnautica never explicitly tells you these things, but it does leave you a trail of clues. Right from the start of the game, your food and your water meters will start to fall.
See calorie intake immediately.
And this forces you to go diving, looking for some tasty treats. On the way, you're also going to find titanium and copper and quartz, which make your starting gear, including the scanner. And the scanner is particularly important because it lets you unlock blueprints of any tech fragments that you find on the seafloor. And this is how you unlock the submarines and all of the other new tools. Each new area will contain new fragments, which then both enable and incentivize you to reach the next area. It's a simple idea that a lot of games use to good effect, but what if you lose track of the breadcrumb trail? It could happen. Sometimes I can't even tell which way is up in this game. Skyrim doesn't trust the player at all, and it just shows you a glowing quest marker at all times. But Below Zero uses much more gentle methods, like distress beacons from crashed life pods, and landmarks that rise above the sea where they're clearly visible. And you can even find maps of the world, complete with marked locations of secrets. This kind of subtle breadcrumb trail is much more satisfying to follow than just a big green arrow, because it forces you to piece clues together. However, as these trails become more subtle, they also become easier to miss. And so that's why the game uses multiple overlapping trails, so that if you miss one, you're still likely to find another. There's one other way that Subnautica guides your exploration that we really shouldn't overlook. Fear. The ocean is scary at the best of times, but in Subnautica, it's even more scary. It's deep and dark and filled with the echoing cries of giant predatory monsters. You're often at risk of being eaten, and you're always at risk of drowning. Underwater, you can barely see 20 meters away, and above the water, you can still barely see 20 meters away. And so, fear becomes another soft limitation, much like how the oxygen system works. Sometimes you'll have all of the gear that you need to explore somewhere, and yet you won't, because fear is telling you to stay well away. Now, as you build up your tools and your gear, you can reduce that feeling of being constantly vulnerable, and this can help to push players onwards. But that uneasy feeling never completely disappears, and this pressures you to explore more slowly, and it makes the exploration more exciting, and it also makes it that much more rewarding when you finally do return to your base in one piece. And so that is Subnautica's greatest design trick. Make the later areas progressively more terrifying, and gradually let the player tech up until they can face the dangers. It's weird to think about, but exploration isn't just about where you can go. It's also about where you can't go, and especially about where you can't go yet. There are lazy ways that you can block progress, like plonking a Snorlax on the only tile that leads out of the village. But a much better idea is to gently steer the player by making some areas dangerous and other areas more accessible, and then guiding the player to the next key location through a trail of subtle hints. You can tell when a game is doing this right because it will support a number of sequence breaks, which means story steps that can be completed in the wrong order by a skilled player. And when it's done really well, you might not even notice there was an intended order to begin with. Subnautica Below Zero also has fewer bugs and technical issues than the original, and is overall a tighter, if maybe slightly smaller, experience. So whether you're a fan of open world games, or you just like being chased by alien sea monsters, this game is one that I would fully recommend. In totally unrelated news, my roguelike/Metroidvania game, Patch Quest, has released on Steam just last week. The game's unique hook is that you have a lasso that lets you mount and ride all of the monsters in the game, and each monster species has several skills that can help you explore. If you want to learn more about Patch Quest, then check out the launch trailer and gameplay video that I made last week. I've linked that video and the Steam page in the bloopy doop below. But that's all for now, and as always, thanks for watching.